Hi, good morning. This is the summary of the talk I gave on 7th of August in New Delhi at the New Delhi Institute of Management. The power of thought and the need for developing new language in HR. I started off by quoting my work with David McClelland. In fact, David McClelland had done a lot of interesting work which he published in a book called The Achieving Society sometime in the year 1961. His thesis, which was done by about mid 50s, ranging over a 15 to 20-year period, demonstrated that children's stories or stories told to children when they were young depicted and decided what kind of society they will make in future or their own personal achievement in their own lives. He demonstrated that if children are told stories where the hero does excellent things, competes with somebody else and tries to accomplish something new, sets up new benchmarks, accomplishes unique things, or competes with someone else, creatively designs things, etc., what he called as achievement motivation. Those children, when they become adults, strived for excellence in whatever they had done and improved their own economic development. And when you did the same thing for a large number of children, that means the kind of textbooks you write, the kind of language you speak, 15 to 20 years later, those countries demonstrated high rate of economic development. Also, I think it was discovered that those countries where children were given stories which focused on affiliation remained largely inward looking, content with their own relationships, and did not venture to learn from others and go outside. Similar way, those countries where children were told stories filled with power, dominance, and so on, did not improve the welfare of their country, but I think they quite often waged wars and got involved in internal, external fights and things like that. So the conclusion was if any country has to economically develop, it should start by teaching children a language of development, language of achievement, language of positive influence, language of creativity, and things like that. McClelland, of course, demonstrated in India when he came to SIET Institute in Hyderabad in mid 60s by training a group of people in achievement motivation, what he called as achievement motivation lab, by giving them an achievement language, demonstrated that they could become more entrepreneurial, which was documented in his book Motivating Economic Achievement, jointly done by David McClelland and another colleague of him from Harvard. I had the pleasure of working with David McClelland sometime in 1975 for a short period when I was translating a new tool that he was developing. However, today my talk is on how language influences thought and thought in turn influences actions. It is said that we are products of our thought, and thought is a product of the language that we use. Now, I'm talking about the utility of using the right kind of language. After I started reflecting about the use of language, I went back to what Dr. Udai Pareek and I wrote in the year 1974-1975 when we started the first Human Resource Development Department in Larsen and Toubro. It's given in our consulting report. In the second part of the report in 1977, which outlined the principles in designing HR, this particular part was largely written by Dr. Pareek. I give full credit to him. I may have added here and there one or two things. But it's very interesting to look at the language of HR he has used in the year 1977, or both of us have been using this language consistently thereafter. The principles in designing HR systems outlined in 1977 uses the terms like this: focus, enabling capabilities, development, organizational health, problem solving capability, diagnostic ability, timely solutions, effective solutions, open system, commitment of employees, linking with other systems, integrated development, multiplication of talent, potential, awareness of strengths, maximizing contribution, organizational roles, exploring talent, providing individual autonomy, increased responsibility, enjoying jobs, flexibility, innovativeness, decentralization, delegation, shared responsibility, knowing each other, maximizing opportunities, monitoring service initiative, participative decision making, representation of people, balancing adaptation and change, organizational culture, adaptation to culture, and so on. Of course, there are also here and there a couple of negative languages. It's more to prevent this. Frustrated employees has not been consulted, disciplinary action, lack of involvement. I think you will hardly find 5, 6 such negative kind of things. Otherwise, you would find terms like differentiation, integration, distinctiveness, clear identity, organization development, training, diffusion of the function, participation of line managers, ensuring responsibility, insightful leadership, strengthening other functions, long range planning, feedback, reinforcement mechanisms, quantification, computer storage, which comes closer to what AI does now, insightful decisions, internal help, external help, self renewal, continuous review, ritualism, effective introduction, phased introduction, optimum layoff, external help, internal expertise, and things like that. I think these are all wonderful kind of language, a language which I think HR profession should have adopted and focused on this rather than quite a few of the negative things that have been found to be characterize the HR field. There was a very interesting book written by James Allen, As a Man Thinketh. I think this book outlines thought leads to action, language impacts thought, and the language you teach is the motivation you create. We are makers of ourselves the way we think. A man is complete sum of all his thoughts. Hidden seeds of thought, act is the blossom of thought, and joy is the joy and suffering or the fruits. I think these are some very interesting kind of things. Those of you, I think today on 7th of August, we have signed a MOU with National HRD Network starting Udai Pareek Memorial Fund. Therefore, I thought it was an appropriate time to remember other language apart from in his HRD contributions Udai Pareek has used. Udai Pareek is known for his contribution to the concept of extension motivation. Sometime in mid-64, he wrote an article on a motivation paradigm for development. This was published in Journal of Social Issues, which is a prestigious journal, where he talked of how extension motivation leads to development of nations. I would assume Udai Pareek borrowed heavily from what India was doing immediately after independence. India created a new role called extension educator. There were agriculture extension officers, educational extension officers, family planning and health extension officers. There are lots and lots of extension officers. Extension became a very important concept, which means that there is a knowledge generated somewhere. The officer is trained to take this knowledge and make it available to the rural masses so that they can develop themselves. That is how the concept of extension was formed. I assume Dr. Pareek borrowed on this, and his theory was if a country has high extension motivation multiplied with achievement motivation and has less dependence motivation, do not depend too much on others, then that country will prosper. So in fact, I think it is true for a country or individuals You should have a concern to help others, multiply it with your achievement drive, but have less of dependence. And that is the concept of paradigm for development. When you go through, I think unfortunately Dr. Pareek had not written too much on extension motivation, but whatever literature is available, in fact we have run laboratories, ISAPS had run a laboratory on extension motivation, and we at Dr. Pareek, myself, Somnath, Paul Siromani and a number of others used it to run extension labs. The little bit of the language that constituted these labs is terms like extension is extending yourself, a desire or need to help others, a desire to work for larger group goals, superordinate goals, motivation for helping, benefits to a wider group, sacrifice for others, ability to sacrifice personal comfort for the well-being of others, drivers of social development. I think these are some of the positive terms that are used. So this language of extension is something which is very useful in development. Similarly, if you look at Dr. Udai Pareek's contributions in terms of role efficacy and stress, in fact, when Udai developed role efficacy, both of us were doing a program for Air India officers, that is again sometime in mid-70s. I was teaching Who Am I? Dr. Pareek was sitting at the back of my class and he was formulating a role efficacy, what is my role? And he came up with some dimensions of role efficacy and I added to that, and ultimately it resulted in a 10-dimensional role efficacy test. Now the terms that are used in role efficacy and the subsequent work of role stress by Dr. Pareek are centrality, importance, significance, linkage, superordination, proactivity, confrontation, influence, personal growth, inter-role linkage, helping relationship. And how to avoid role stress and get the best out of your role. Self-role distance, these are the things to be avoided. Inter-role distance, role overload, role inadequacy, problem solving, collaboration, opportunities, role stagnation, and so on. In all his writings on institution building, Udai Pareek used a number of interesting terms again. This is the language: self-renewal, preparation, innovation, consolidation, multiplication, review, attention to process, goal uniqueness, autonomy, values, developing people, mutuality, self-reliance, dialogue, owning up, disposition, experimentation, decentralization, creativity, mutuality, self-reliance, integrative approach, humanism, and problem solution. I think, friends, these are all indicate the language promoted by Udai Pareek is very positive, very enabling, very empowering, development oriented. This, in my view, is a real HRD. So all HR professionals should read some of his books, understand his concepts, and try to create a very positive kind of thought process. And it is very important for HR people. In the second part of this talk, I am going to talk about what is the kind of language that we use and how it influences our thought, and the need for developing a new language by all HR professionals. What is it that the new language should consist of, and so on. I'll talk about it in part 2 of this talk on the importance of language in impacting thought and leading to action. Thank you very much for listening to the first part of this video. Do look forward, listen to the second part on the language that HR professionals should use. All the best and have a great day.